going to look at Daniel chapter 2, and the title of the message for this morning is God Reveals Nebuchadnezzar's Dream. This is August 23rd, 2025. God reveals Nebuchadnezzar's dream. What I'm going to do in giving the message as far as this dream is concerned will be radically different to anything that you might have been exposed to. I'm going to be focusing on how Daniel interprets the dream. God gave it to him, and how he interpreted the dream. So before before Daniel interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream, none of the magicians or the wise people of Babylon could interpret the dream. They didn't have it in them. In your thoughts, what do you think was happening when Nebuchadnezzar could not remember the dream at all? And the significance of the dream, the importance of that dream is so serious, so important that it covers, and I'm going to show this, that dream covers all the way back to when Lucifer rebelled against God. That's how important this dream is. All the way back from the time Lucifer rebelled against God, and all the way down to the end when the stone that is taken off the mountain and destroys the image, and that the image becomes completely dust. And dust is what? We were made of dust. So it goes back to the dust, domain of the dust. And who feeds on the dust? The serpent. That's the serpent's food. So that serpent's food started with his rebellion in heaven, came down to the garden, and then this whole thing is going to be played out right until the end. So and I'm sure some people that have been exposed to this study in the book of Daniel and have focused on it, there's a particular church that is involved in very deep studies of the book of Daniel and Revelation. And what I'm going to share, again, I'm stating this, if they were present here, they most probably would get very upset with what I'm going to be doing. But the reason that I'm doing this and in looking at this in the light of what I've already discussed. So then we can say, how is it that this dream of Nebuchadnezzar went blank on him, and he could just vaguely remember most probably a few things, but the most important aspect of that dream was not with him? Who do you think was behind it? So the religious, the wise people of Babylon couldn't understand it, but only God could reveal it to Daniel. After the praying, and we've studied all of that before, after going to God and praying and doing all of this, then God gave him the understanding of the dream. So if God gave him the understanding of the dream, then who was behind him not knowing the dream?
God.
Who?
God. No, if Nebuchadnezzar didn't know the dream, wouldn't Satan be behind that?
Satan was behind that. See, because God revealed it to Daniel. But Satan didn't want Nebuchadnezzar's dream to be known. Why? Because it's going to expose his kingdom, his government, his system, and it goes all the way back. Started with his rebellion and goes all the way down to where I believe we are living now in the final phase of the history of the world, when Jesus Christ, that stone, is going to hit this image from head to toe, and it turns into dust. So we know from the Bible, and if you want, I better go there to make sure that we understand this the way it should be understood. So here, Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar is the what? King of Babylon, correct? So if Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon, then I'm going to read something that applies directly to the king of Babylon, but you see who else it applies to. I'm reading from Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 3. It shall come to pass in the day the Lord give you rest from your sorrow and from your fear and the hard bondage in which you were made to serve, that you will take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. Now, who is the king of Babylon here? I'm reading it to you. How the oppressor has ceased, how the golden city has ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers, he who struck the people in wrath and continual stroke, he who ruled the nations in anger, is persecuted and no one hinders. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. Indeed, the cypress tree rejoices over you, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were cut down, no woodman has come against us. I read that portion. Now I'm going to verse 12 of Isaiah chapter 14. And here again I'm stating it in verse 3. In verse 4. That you will take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. Verse 4 of Isaiah 14. Now verse 12. How you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground. You who have weakened the nations, for you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. This is Lucifer. I will sit on the mount of the congregation on the further sides of the north. So what Lucifer here is stating, that he is going to what? I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. So he is claiming that when it says above the stars of God, he's not saying that he's going to be what? Above God. He's not saying that. The stars of God are the angels. So he is saying, I am going to be what? Above the stars of God. I will be equal with God. Well, how is he going to be equal with God? Because of the form of government that he introduced. Okay? So there, right in Isaiah 14, we see where this originated from. Now, I want us to make sure to understand this whole image, the way it should be understood. So we saw the king of Babylon. And the king of Babylon was, no question, it is applied to Nebuchadnezzar, but who's above Nebuchadnezzar? Lucifer, the devil himself. He is the one that is above Nebuchadnezzar. For that matter, not only over Nebuchadnezzar, but all subsequent form of government, all subsequent system of governing that started on our earth is tied up with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Not the tree of life. The tree of life represents God's agape love. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he is what? He is the king. Lucifer is the king of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that originated in heaven. Talking of Lucifer again. You were the seal of perfection. Before I read that, let's see again to make sure. In Isaiah 14, it was the king of Babylon. Here, concerning Lucifer, moreover, the word of the Lord came to me, to Ezekiel, saying, Son of man, take up a lamentation for the king of Tyre, and say to him, Thus says the Lord. So there we had what? The king of Babylon. Here we have the king of Tyre. Well, who again is the king of Tyre? It was Nebuchadnezzar. He defeated the people, the government of Tyre, and he took over and he became the king of Tyre. But who again is referred to as the king of Tyre? You are the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You are in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. The sardius, topaz, and goes through the whole thing. Verse 14, you were an anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of the fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways from the day we were created till iniquity was found in you. Okay, so here it's very clear to make sure that we understand that it is referring to Lucifer. Verse 16, by the abundance of your trading you became filled with violence within, and you sin. So the whole system that Lucifer introduced was violence. His method of governance involved using violence to govern. So which means to say, if you did not obey, he would use whatever form of violence he had to use to make you to conform. Therefore I cast you as a profane thing out of where? The mountain of God. Which is the mountain of God? Is God's system of governing everything with what? With agape love. Okay? So he was cast out because of his becoming profane. And I destroyed your covering cherub. That is Lucifer. He was a covering cherub in the throne room of God. And how did God destroy him? By revealing the truth, he could no longer fool. So here, now we're going to go to Daniel. And start with verse 31 of Daniel chapter 2. Knowing what we have just discussed now. Daniel saying, you, O king, were watching, and behold a great image. This is Daniel interpreting the dream. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image's head was of fine gold. So Babylon, representing Satan and his system, is represented here as what? Fine what? Gold. So you can ask the question and say, well, now you are really gone down the deep end, Posse. Because gold here represents God. Fine gold, which means to say what? It's been what? Refined. It's been purified. It's fine gold. Think, dear ones, what this means. This golden image is represented by, the golden head is representing Babylon. And who belongs to the Babylonian system? Who's the governor, or who's the king, or who's the ruler of the Satan? Okay? So what this is teaching us, that the mother lode, the gold of Lucifer's system, not God's kind of gold, his, Lucifer's kind of gold, is the head. His system is doing what? His system is controlling all of the earth. So when the dream came and God showed Nebuchadnezzar clearly that you, Nebuchadnezzar, are a head of gold. Denise, unfortunately, we wanted to put it on the big screen. It's not on the big screen. We got it in the iPad. If she can show it to...
I'll just put it here.
If you can see it, I don't think you can see it. It is so small. and the writings on it is so small, but it clearly gives you the totality of the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, and how it involves first the head, which was Babylon. And who's the head of Babylon? The Satan himself. I just read this out to you and you've seen it. So what this means, that this system in our sphere, in our world, started in the Garden of Eden. He became the king. He's the king of Babylon with his tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Satan is. That's Babylon in type in the garden, but we don't get it till we come here in the dream. So we are backtracking and looking at this to understand it. So he's a gold, which means to say Satan's system has gold in it, but that is satanic gold. It is so powerful that if we have not understood the tree of life principle, we are all going to be living and being thinking and doing things with this system. So that's why all. So you could ask the question and say, well, look, why did it start with Babylon? Why the history goes from Babylon all the way down to the second coming of Jesus Christ? Why doesn't it go all the way back, right from the beginning of the rebellion? Well, I just shared it with you. It did, didn't it? We went and looked back and traced it. It went all the way back to Lucifer when iniquity was found in him and he rebelled. That is the Babylonian system. That's the head of gold that started there in Lucifer's rebellion against God. Then it came into Eden, into the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So when we are not eating of the tree of life, we are feeding on Lucifer's system. Every government is governed by Lucifer's system, and God wants to take us out of this. So he is the head of gold. This image was of fine gold, its chest and arms, and you see it there, its chest and arms of silver. And you can see the descending order of the metal that is all involved, okay? So the head is of gold, the chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. So this is a descending order of what is going on. The head, the pinnacle of this order was the head of gold. Everything that follows, all the way from Lucifer's rebellion in heaven, keeps going. Now here, then look at what he says in verse 34. You watched, this is Nebuchadnezzar's dream, as he watched, a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floor. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became what? A great mountain and filled the whole earth. What was the mountain that Lucifer was cast out of? God's mountain. And what is God's mountain? God's system of governance. How God governs with agape love. That is God's system of governance. So here, when we are told that the whole earth, with these four images, and each, the head stands for Babylon, the silver stands for Medo-Persia, the bronze stands for Greece, and the iron stands for Rome. And if you go historically, you will find that this is how historically it's there. You got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. And as we're going to study in the book of Daniel, we will see things that is going to be added on. Then in the book of Revelation, we will see how all this fits for us living at this end time. So my emphasis here again, and I've covered this, 4 governments or 4 ruling powers, and they were all controlled by Satan. So here when this stone is taken out of the, and broken and destroys the image, and a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Well, what filled the whole earth? We should ask ourselves that question. Well, what could have filled the whole earth when it goes all the way down to our present time? So it started there in heaven. Lucifer as the king of Babylon started there, came all the way down to the earth, and now applies to the end time. So this image, that becomes a mountain, and the mountain is what? God's system, understanding God's character, understanding the difference between the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I'll read to you now from Revelation 18. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. The whole earth was what? Illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison of every foul spirit, a cage of every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The whole Babylonian system, which was originated with Satan, the whole world has been feeding on this system until we get this glory of God that fills the whole earth. And the glory of God that fills the whole earth is coming to an understanding of God's character the way it should be understood, and not knowing God's character the way the devil wants us to understand it. And then I'll finish this portion of reading here from verse 6 now of Revelation 18. Rendered to her, which is her system, her governance, rendered to her just as she rendered to you. Everything that Babylon did, everything that Satan was involved with, the cause and effect kicks in. So what happened? Whatever he sow, he's going to reap. So here it's stating, render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her system. Her is Babylon, representing Satan, and render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mixed double for her, in the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. This doesn't mean to say God is arbitrarily doing this. The system, God had clearly laid out the plans even in Deuteronomy chapter 28. He clearly laid out the path of blessing and the path of curses. And our Sabbath class covered this very well. If you walk on the path of blessings, inherent in that path is the blessings from God. If you decide to walk in the path of curses, inherent in that path is the curses. So what is describing here of the demise of Satan and his system is on the basis of cause and effect. Whatever man sows, so shall he also reap. Satan sowed all this evil, and this is what he is reaping. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. Again, it's not from God, but the system. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen and am no widow and will not see sorrow. Therefore her plagues, her own system, her plagues will come in one day: death and mourning and famine. Death clearly identified as belonging to Satan's system. And it's using a feminine pronoun here. And she will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges. So now we see how this whole system and how this image of Daniel chapter 2, defining clearly all the way back to Lucifer's rebellion and all the way down to Jesus Christ coming. And this stone, this mountain will fill the whole earth. And that's what it says. And the earth was illuminated with his glory. The earth was illuminated with the truth that is being shared about God's agape love. The whole earth will be filled with this understanding, and people will live out this in their lives. With this, there's more to read here, but we have pretty well covered what I think we need to cover. And next Sabbath, we're going to look at Daniel chapter 3, and the pastor covered it in the fiery furnace, heated 7 times. We're going to discuss that in the light of what we have understood here this morning. And that we will use the same principle to understand Daniel chapter 3.